and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and along with my fellow co-hosts, we review films either current or classic on our show, all with a lovable bear twist. And we've actually got one of each for you this week in terms of classic and new. We're going to be reviewing the Firestarter remake, as well as celebrating the 40th anniversary of Conan the Barbarian, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. We've got a big show tonight. We got a whole lot to talk about, but let me introduce the co-hosts I mentioned just moments ago before we dive in. Jim Pugliafico is with us on the show. Welcome, Jim. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, and happy to be here again after a bit of a break. And seems like we got some friends joining us too, so I'm excited for these two movies. We haven't done a classic film for quite a while now, so and this one was it's fun, and we're gonna have fun diving into both movies whether we like them or not, like we always do. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely some fun stuff to talk about. Probably more so Conan than Firestarter, maybe, question mark. We'll see. That's the joy of these kinds of shows. Maybe you'll be surprised. But Will Lindis is here with us as well. Welcome, Will.
Hey, that's right, fellow podcasters. This one's going to be lit.
Right.
Yeah. You kind of think about what pun you want to do at the beginning of an episode, and you're kind of plunged into this existential crisis of you want to go with something really on the nose? Do you want to do something that's witty? And you just sometimes you just shit out whatever happens. Yeah, this one's going to be lit. We're doing Firestarter. That's fire. That's what we got.
Fire and steel.
And you know what? Not to tip my hat too much, but that might be the most entertained that Firestarter has given me.
Oh boy, this is going to be a great conversation. Can't wait. Firestarter is up first, and Hammy is with us in the live audience. He says this podcast is going to be fire, and then he said, Will just burned my joke.
Oh, yeah.
Hey. And Ben Woolley says, howdy, sexy bears. Hey, Ben. Good to see you. Always a treat. Welcome.
This is going to be cool.
All right, Jim, Will, we have so much to talk about. Are you ready to dive into our first review, which is Firestarter?
Yep. Yeah, let's do this.
Let's turn up the heat.
Awesome. Nice. If you are not familiar with the format of our show, we like to talk about films spoiler-free for about 10 or 15 minutes, at least in terms of new films. Old films like Conan, we may just spoil right from the get-go because it's 40 years old. But at least with Firestarter, we will protect your virginal innocence if that's the thing you want protected. So we'll give you a fair warning before we open things up for spoilers. If you haven't seen Firestarter yet and you're like, yeah, I kind of want to hear, whether it was good or bad, we'll certainly give you our point of view. Do with that what you will. But all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Firestarter. All right. So, Will, I know this is a remake of an 80s film. A lot of people may have seen the original movie. They may not have. I was talking to someone the other day who was like, Firestarter, what the hell is that? And I'm like, how have you not seen this classic 80s movie? Well, they remade it. But give us the brief setup of what this film is about. And I know you tipped your hat a little bit before the jump, but tell us what you thought about this movie.
Absolutely. So Firestarter is the new film that is a remake of the 1984 film based off of a Stephen King novel. The original actually starred a very young Drew Barrymore in the titular role. Here with the remake, we're looking at this story about this young girl who's got the power to set things on fire with her mind. And as she has to deal with that and what it means to sort of be in control or not in control of that type of power, there are several other external parties that are interested in her as well, including her own parents, played by Zac Efron and Ryan Kiera Armstrong, as well as a government group that has their eyes set on the young Firestarter. I'll start by saying, like, I don't have any like precious attachment to the 1984 version. I've seen it maybe once or twice. It's fine for what it is. It's you know, good starting off for Drew Barrymore's career. Heather Locklear was in it. You know, it's whatever. I just didn't like this one. It was a very dull movie. Like, there were a couple of moments in it that are fine, but like each of the moments that sort of, it's not even the connective tissue on this one. There's just long stretches where I just kind of did not give much of a shit about what was happening in this movie. Which, if you really think about it, this type of movie should be the type of thing that would be like an easy lay for me, right? Because there are some parallels within this film itself to, like, you know, if you have someone with this sort of power, that sort of makes them like a superhero. But, you know, what is that like in a more realistic world? What is that like in a world where, you know, you're as much a risk to the people around you as you are, you know, someone who can harness their powers for whatever. It's just, we've seen this exact story done so many other times, so much better. I would strongly recommend anyone that's thinking about watching Firestarter and doesn't know whether they should or not, go check out Fast Color from a few years ago. One of my favorite movies of this last decade. It's not too terribly far off from the plot of this, and it is substantially better. Zac Efron plays the father in this, and I mentioned him before. It's interesting seeing him transition from like teen heartthrob into adult heartthrob into dad mode, right? And I don't think there was anything wrong with his performance, but I don't know that he necessarily. Sometimes a good performance can save bad material, and I don't think that his performance was good enough to save this material. I think it was serviceable enough. No fault against him, but it was fine at best. I think probably the most compelling character in this, we do get to see Michael Greyeyes, who I absolutely adore in most of the things that he does. Maybe a little underutilized here, and his character's motivations and turns are a little abrupt, but it's fun seeing him on screen regardless. I don't know. This one is not egregiously bad. There weren't any scenes that made me go like, what the fuck am I watching? More so than anything, this one committed the worst sin that I can put in a movie. It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad enough to be interesting. It just sort of was. This is one of those movies that at the end of the year, I'm going to be looking at the list of films that I watched to see what made my top 10 list. And I'm going to go, yeah, I guess I did watch Firestarter this year. And that's going to be as much space in my brain that this film's going to occupy. Sorry.
All right. So just to clarify, this is not a recommend from you then.
Oh yeah. 5 out of 5 stars, must watch.
Must watch on Peacock.
Yeah, no, it's a pass.
All right, we have got one pass. Let's move on to Jim. Jim, what did you think? Is this a pass or play?
Well, yeah, I think I'm pretty much right there with Will. Just in the end, I think this was very underwhelming and forgettable, right? I mean, we know that we'll see the title, like Will says, if we go back at the end of the year and we look at all the movies we watch, we see Firestarter, we'll instantly recognize the title of the movie because we know Firestarter, it's a Stephen King property. It was a movie that was made in 1984 with Drew Barrymore, blah, 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 blah. But I bet you we won't remember much about this movie. And look, Zac Efron is fine here. I think the material betrays every actor in this. I think the actors are doing, trying to do the best they can, and I think they do. And I just don't think any of the characters are that compelling, or their stories are that compelling. Even Michael Greyeyes, who I love, he's a great actor. I want to see him do more things. He does kind of even get watered down in this movie, and that's that's a shame too. But yeah, I would say for me, this is a pass also. Like it's it's just like, I don't know, what's something you eat and then you just afterwards you just, it's like the I don't know, something you eat. It's not very nourishing. It's not very good. It's like the white bread of movies. It's like it doesn't really stay with you that long. And yeah,
It's like junk food, but like when you get to the bottom of the bag of candy and you're kind of getting to the flavor that you don't like as much, but you eat it
yeah,
anyways.
right,
Yeah.
right. Um, yeah, this is a pass for me as well. Just didn't really have much fun with it. Here's the thing: this movie tends to get lost. Will, you mentioned it too. There are a lot of other movies that are like this, right? Of course, we have the plethora of superhero movies out now, right? And a lot of them have origin stories and things like that. One that pops into mind that's a much, much, much better film than this is Midnight Special, right? Where you have a child who has powers, and like it has interesting characters, interesting relationships. This one just didn't have it, and I think it just gets lost in today's razzle dazzle of superhero movies to be so flat and so unappealing, and that's a shame. But and I'm one who I did not read the novel from Stephen King. I did watch the original movie, but it was so long ago. I think I forgot a lot of that too. And I don't remember that as being very great. Drew Barrymore was kind of a sensation at the time because I think she did this like on the heels of E.T. And it was her kind of branching out into something a little bit different. So I think that propelled that movie a little bit. I don't know if I'd call this I don't know if I could call this a remake of the original movie because they're both based on the novel, and are they just readaptions or remakes? I think you could view it maybe either way. And I don't know which one adheres more closely to the material, the 1984 movie or this one either. But I'm not sure in the end it makes any difference if you don't make if you don't make a movie product that's good enough to keep our attention and make us interested. It's kind of all for the lost anyway. So yeah, sorry, long-winded, but nope, I didn't like this one.
All right, so that is 2 passes on this film. We've got a comment from Hammy who says Drew Barrymore's first 2 movies before Firestarter were Altered States, then E.T.
Right.
It's interesting that we keep going back to the
Altered
original
States.
movie rather than talking about the new movie that we're here to talk about. But I think that's only natural. I feel some of what you guys are saying. I think I'm a little more positive on this film than either of you were. I will say that it probably just whelmed me. I wasn't underwhelmed. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was just whelmed. It was about what I expected it to be. We did get a hairy-chested Zac Efron shot, which is a boon to this movie. I'm surprised they didn't shave him, but whatever. I'm glad they didn't. But yeah, otherwise, this movie is fairly middling. It plays out about like you'd expect if you've seen the original movie. If you haven't seen the original movie, it plays out about like you'd expect if you watch Stranger Things or anything else that's trying to cash in on sort of the 80s like government hiding things, kids with special things going on, and the two collide. I think it was fine. This this movie definitely did a couple things that I was not a big fan of. One made me actually really angry, and we'll talk about that in spoilers. But I do want to just comment on a couple things here. One, Zac Efron in a serious role isn't something that we see a lot. I think he did fine. The visuals and the effects of the firepower in action, I thought were actually fairly pretty good. There was only one scene where it's like, yeah, that's totally like green screen and CGI fire, and nothing in this shot is real. But it's not really that immersion breaking for me. Right now, there's just not a lot in theaters out to see, unless you haven't yet seen Doctor Strange. So if you're looking for something like you just want a reason to go to the movies and watch a movie, you can turn your brain off, maybe enjoy something. I would say Firestarter is a recommend, but uh, I don't recommend the film, you know, trying to impress upon you that it's the greatest film ever, because it's definitely not. But it's if you want something to do, you could go do it. So maybe we'll say it's a soft recommend from me. But yeah, nothing really blew me away here, but it was okay.
Yeah, this film opened up, I think, both in parallel in movie theaters and on streaming platform Peacock. Right. Is that right?
It is.
I'll be shocked if after, and it's been like 2 weeks since we've seen this movie almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think. Yeah. And that's why I think a lot of it is starting to already fade from my consciousness. But I don't know how long this movie is going to stick around in theaters. So if you want to see all those cool fire effects in the theater, you better get out there and see them now.
Get out there and do it. It's interesting. Like one of the things that I was thinking might save the movie for me it also whelmed me, and that's John Carpenter did the score, and I love a good John Carpenter score, and there's a little bit of like history there with John Carpenter originally being tapped for the original film and then not being included in it, and so all of that type of stuff. So I there's a lot of like weird history there that it's I guess it's kind of fun to see him here there, but at the same time, this wasn't a bad score at all, but it didn't really like kick into gear for me, and that was doubly disappointing, because the thing that I was thinking I could at least I can look forward to this didn't do it for me either.
Yeah.
Every time that score, and we love John Carpenter's scores, and every time the score kicked in, it's instantly recognizable as a Carpenter score, instantly. But I'm thinking of a much better movie, or at least a couple better movies with John Carpenter scores than the movie I'm watching. Maybe the score was too close to some of his other stuff in terms of how it was put together, but I kept being pulled out and thinking of Halloween, actually.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, fellas, how do you feel about moving on into some spoiler territory for this film?
Yeah, let's spoil it. Although, whatever there is to spoil, we'll spoil.
Yeah, come on, guys. Let's
find something to spoil.
Well, there's a couple things I think we can spoil with this film. So we're going to go ahead and move into spoiler territory. If you've not yet seen Firestarter and you want to protect your knowledge of the plot, what happens, etc., this is your time to step away for about the next 10, 12 minutes. And then come on back for our 40th anniversary celebration of Conan the Barbarian. You don't want to miss that. We've got a special surprise coming up for you, folks. So make sure, and if you do step away, be sure to return. But all of that said, spoilers for Firestarter are now officially fair game. Hope you guys don't mind, but I'm going to take the mic on this one and start us off with the moment that made me angry in this film. So about a third of the way into the film, the little girl, she keeps losing control of her powers. Her and her dad are on the run, and they like stop in this alleyway, and she ends up setting a cat on fire. And the poor cat isn't all the way dead. It's like meowing and lifting its head while its half scorched body
smoking and stuff.
And the dad is like, you need to put it out of its misery. So she like fries it again, and we just hear this awful noise come from the cat. I don't know. As an animal lover, that really hurt me in the heart. I didn't think we needed to see that. If they're trying to get across the manifestation of her out of control powers, just set the fucking dumpster on fire. Like, you don't need to have her kill a cat. I don't know.
Yeah, or if you do, I mean, like, this isn't the type of movie that really needed like the zoom in on the cat, right? Like, I think that you can get away with some like pretty fucked up shit in movies that are tonally that direction. This movie wasn't that for the rest of the film. Like, it wasn't. It felt like in a lot of places it pulled its punches and it just randomly didn't hear. If you still want to have like the show of her throwing the cat, you can have the sound of the cat, like the and like just the look on the face. Like there's ways that you can imply without doing, right? So I'm with you, Brad. Like I think that it maybe didn't like necessarily like anger me as much as it just from a structural perspective, it just felt like it didn't fit this movie.
Now,
And
Will, you're kind of a dog person. Would you feel differently if it was a dog versus a cat?
no, because
Okay.
I've owned many a cat in my years, right?
Okay.
So I've had close attachments to cats too. I just don't like having both because it's two different ways of treating like the bathroom situation. So I chose the dog route. But I don't like to do both at the same time. But no, I mean, I go to a genre film festival where the joke is like, like how many dogs are going to die that year, right?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily whether or not you see them or not. It's a movie for me. Like it's fiction,
Okay.
it's whatever. But for me, it is though. If you're going to do that, and if you're going to do it, you know that it's going to have that impact on the audience, which is why you show it. It needs to tonally match what you're doing within the film, and it didn't. That's the thing there. Like if you're going to do it effectively. If we saw something like that in like a Pet Sematary movie, it would make sense because it's totally matching what's happening in the movie, right? Or if this movie was a movie that lingered on kind of like the gore and the terror of like the burn marks more with like the human victims too, it wouldn't feel as out of place. But again,
Right.
I think it felt out of place given kind of the rest of the film.
Yeah, and I thought they were going to kind of go that way too, Brad. They were going to, I thought for sure during the scene, all right, I guess I even forget what happened for the initial, fire thing at the cat. But after that, I thought for sure, oh, they're not going to show, they're not going to actually show the cat torched, right? It probably won't. It probably won't, right? Movie, and then boom, they do, and I'm like, oh, why'd you do that? Why'd you have to do that? That was gross. That was awful. But yeah, Stephen King has a thing about, I think he's an animal guy, so like a pet guy. So I don't know why he has this thing about inflicting harm on animals and pets and stuff. I mean, Cujo, Pet Cemetery, this one, there's probably many others that don't come to mind because I'm certainly not an aficionado of King, but yeah, just kind of weird. Brad, I totally see it. It did kind of turn me off. Like, oh, why'd you have to do that? It didn't, I don't know. I don't know what the movie was trying to do there. You know what I mean? It wasn't, even if it was like an animal that she had of affection for, that she inadvertently like hurt, that might have at least had some emotional resonance. You know what I mean? And it didn't. It just felt like a throwaway.
Or if we'd seen a different reaction from Zac Efron's father character, right? Because this is supposed to show, like on paper, that scene is supposed to show like she is dangerous because she's not being focused the right way. So maybe we do need to train her, or maybe it is the government's right and they do need to get her. But whatever, this is obviously showing that she's a real threat, as is. And the Zac Efron's response is like, well, honey, wasn't great that you torched that cat, but you're gonna have to torch it the rest of the way. And it felt very underwhelming. Like if we had seen like much more of like the horror like on his face on just what had happened, and then he had to like fight that back and say, okay, now I'm in this shitty situation with my daughter and I've got to do something like that. That could have even worked really well too. But it felt like it didn't, like what we saw didn't match the rest of the stakes of the scene. I think that's what I'm getting at. I think that's what it was. Like it felt like such an over exaggeration for the way the characters reacted to it.
So in the end, our main character, Charlie, Firestarter girl, ends up kind of forming a friendship, I guess, with the Rainbird character, Michael Grey Eyes. He, the whole movie, we think that, he's hunting her down for a specific reason for this government agency. Right. And then I believe we find out that he's actually trying to keep her out of their midst. Right. Is that the way it went?
He was hunting them down for her. Like he was hunting them down for the government agency. It was just the mother said this thing like right before he killed her that was like, when you meet her, your world is going to change and you'll understand. And then he did meet her, and he was just like, holy shit, like her powers are, and he reevaluated what he was doing. So he was working for the government agency there. He just stopped doing what he was doing for them at a certain point, because he was sort of like won over to, Charlie's side.
Because he had a certain empathy for her, right? Maybe going through something like that himself, right?
They both had the shining.
Right. They both had the shine, right?
Maybe explain the shine for anyone who is not a Stephen King aficionado.
Oh, yeah. In the Stephen King movie, The Shining, sort of a indie cult favorite, the characters there have like a psionic abilities. And they call that, like, kind of colloquially within that, the shine. And you kind of see it kind of come through a few of the other works that Stephen King does. Whenever it's something that's telepathy or telepathically related, it's sort of some variation of the same thing. You think about the whatchamacallit, the Duddits character from the really shitty one with the shit weasels, Dreamcatcher. Like a lot of the, even like the power that the characters like sort of share in it and can connect with each other. It's all sort of like pseudo based on this kind of like idea of what like psionics is to Stephen King. So, but anyways, the real joke here is just, they both have mutant telepathy powers, and that's where their bond comes from.
I don't know that we'll get a Firestarter 2, The Further Adventures of Rainbird and Charlie, but even if we did, I doubt we'd see it. So,
in one of those, we got a TV movie not too long ago called Firestarter 2: The Rekindling, that I don't remember ever hearing about, but apparently there was one where she's an adult now. I think it had I'm trying to think of the actors it had in it, but it had some pretty top-notch actors in it. Dennis Hopper was in it.
Malcolm McDowell. I didn't know this even existed. I'm literally looking it up right now. And
so who knows? Maybe we'll get a remake of that one, right?
Oh my God! So it came out in 2002, and if you just look it up on IMDb, the cover art is the most 2002 looking image I think I've ever seen. Like, if I could like capture everything that happened in that year and put it into like one poster in terms of like fonts and design choices and all of that stuff, they've perfectly captured.
Did they sexualize Charlie in that one?
No, but she's just doing this, like, she almost looks like this would also be a good box art for like season 8 of Charmed or something like that. Or however many seasons they did. I don't know.
Oh, goodness. Well, fellas, any other aspects of this film you want to talk about before we wrap this one up?
I think it's kind of telling. You said it before. We spent a lot of time talking about Drew Barrymore. We're spending time talking about Firestarter Rekindled. We're talking about other Stephen King works. I think that this movie is just not interesting enough to be good or to be bad, and that's rough. Like, it's really, really rough to like to talk about, to recommend against. It's hard to be passionate one way or the other about this film. If anything, the cat scene was probably the only thing where they took a swing. It was a swing and a miss, but it was like at least they swung at something here. I don't know. Yeah, this is again, literally, I challenge anyone to remember this movie in December. Because I'm going to fail that challenge.
We'll just remember the cat. That's all we'll remember.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if we don't have any further thoughts on Firestarter, I think we will go ahead. As Hammy says, this movie conversation has been extinguished. If we were Jeff Probst, we would snuff out the torch. Survivor joke. Anyway. All right. So we're going to change things up a little bit and move on to our next movie discussion. 40 years ago, a little film came out that blazed across the public, was wildly popular. What? Did I say 30? I meant 40.
No, I was just
Oh,
accentuating what you said. 40 years
okay.
ago.
Gotcha. Yeah, 40 years ago, Conan the Barbarian came out, and we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of this iconic film by talking a little bit about the movie, our experience with the movie, thoughts on the movie. Jim, Will, do we need a spoiler section, or are we just going to go spoilers all in for this one?
I think let's
just do it. Yeah.
All right. We've got a surprise coming up for you after the trailer cut. But here we go. Our discussion and celebration of Conan the Barbarian. All right. So we are going to go ahead and celebrate this movie with a special surprise we have been alluding to. Seems only fitting. Conan was shirtless for the whole movie. We're going to be shirtless for the whole review. What? Bears getting naked? It's happening. All right. And we're back. Will, I love the wig. Very nice. Jim, you've got a He-Man sword. That's very appropriate for the air.
This is a Conan Broadsword, Brad. What are you talking about? You must trust the steel.
And I love your leather cuffs. Very nice. I myself decided to don my leather harness because I don't know. Conan was wearing a harness at a couple points during the film.
He got it at Bearware.
Indeed. All right. So welcome to our 40th anniversary celebration of Conan the Barbarian. If you haven't seen this film yet, and you're like, why are these guys shirtless and putting on wigs and harnesses and swords and gauntlets? We are going to explain it all to you. And by we, I mean Jim.
Ha!
So, Jim, do us a favor and set this movie up. What the fuck is Conan the Barbarian?
Conan the Barbarian ends up being, it's supposed to be 40 years old, but I think it's all a hoax, and it's a new It's a new cheap ripoff movie of The Northman. That's what I think. I think it's somebody just decided to oh shit, we've got 2 weeks. We could remake The Northman with somebody that looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger. No, it's not. Actually, this is a 40-year-old movie. Probably The Northman got a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of
what is good in life?
What's good in life?
Inspiration.
From inspiration from Conan. Here's the IMDb description. A young boy, Conan, becomes a slave after his parents are killed and the tribe destroyed by a savage warlord and sorcerer, Thulsa Doom. When he grows up, he becomes a fearless, invincible fighter. And a fearless, invincible fighter. Set free, he plots revenge against Thulsa Doom. Sorry for that skip there. But yeah, it's this one stars Arnold Schwarzenegger in his second or third ever acting role from 1982. This one is directed by John Milius, and it was written originally by Oliver Stone, come to find out, and then rewritten by John Milius, so they both get writing credits here. This one, God, I hadn't seen this movie in ages. But when we saw The Northman, of course, we started thinking of this movie, and it's like, oh, it's 40 years old. I think we should probably talk about this. And here we are. So I forget, we rented this one, I think, on Apple, right? We streamed it off of Apple TV. And this one has, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger, James Earl Jones, Max von Sydow, Sandal Bergman. It's just Jerry Lopez in a very weird role, and Mako. And I don't know what else Mako is in, but Mako is the wizard in this.
I can tell you.
What?
He was the voice of Uncle Iroh in Avatar: The Last Airbender.
But can you tell us without crying? Because I can't.
Oh.
Leaves on the vine. Sorry. Go, please proceed.
So yeah, this one is man, I appreciate this movie so much for its like stripped downness. Very little dialogue in this movie, actually. It's weird. There's a lot of voiceover exposition, quite a bit voiceover exposition, but not really a lot of dialogue. And I'm not sure why that is. That's obviously a choice. But I kind of liked that there was not a lot of dialogue in this movie. It really kind of fell on the action, and not just action in terms of like fight scenes, chase scenes, whatever, but action, the actions of the characters and their physical appearance to kind of get across, what they're feeling, what their motivations are. I really enjoyed going back to see this one. There's just a lot here. Arnold, a lot of it like today is semi laughable in spots. There are some scenes where Arnold like has to act and like fall down a bunch of rocks and stairs, and like he's like like as he's falling down the stairs, and it's like I just broke out laughing in those scenes. But I mean, there's just some epicness to his character. Obviously, he's in amazing shape here. Apparently, he, of course, he was always a bodybuilder, like Mr. Universe or something. And he actually had to lose weight. He actually had to trim down in order to do this role to be able to wield the broadsword correctly. And he had to do a lot of training about how to wield it, and in order to be able to do that without getting all bound up around himself, he had to lose like 30 pounds. So yeah, this one's just a lot of fun to watch. I loved also its approach. It was a very violent movie. It's a very violent movie. Even by today's standards, I think it's pretty violent. There's beheadings, not just violence, but there's sex in this movie. This movie must have caused quite a stir when it came out in 1982. I don't remember it quite so much upon its release, but between the sex and the gruesome violence, and I'm sure it caused a big to do. It did come out as an R-rated movie as well. But yeah, I enjoyed going back to see this one.
All right. Awesome. Well, Jim, thank you so much for setting the tone, letting us know what you thought. Seeing you wielding He-Man's sword is giving me a special kind of nerd boner. I'm just saying. So let's move on down to Will. Will, I know you and I are, from the same generation. This movie came out 82. How old were you at the time? And what did you think of this movie?
Okay, so this movie is celebrating its 40th anniversary, as we've talked about. I, too, am celebrating my 40th anniversary this year of life. So I was born like 3 months after this movie came out. So, surprise, I didn't see it in theaters. But I'll tell you a little bit about this movie. So this is one of I would consider one of the seminal fantasy / like sword and sorcery films. There's quite a few of these films that have come out that get talked about from time to time. But I think Conan is one of specifically Conan the Barbarian, the one we're talking about, less so Conan the Destroyer. This one holds the hell up, right? Like there is some hokiness to it, but I think that sword and sorcery, like the best sword and sorcery, is allowed to be a little hokey, because it's playing in these fantastical worlds with these fantastical beings doing over the top things, and it does all those things. Gosh, where to start? This movie has two things that I think go incredibly well for it. One, so there was this artist who did a lot of the Conan art for like some of like the books, the comic books and such, named Frank Frazetta. The poster for this movie was Frazetta. And you'll also notice there's a lot of like very classic Conan poses when you look at Frazetta art. And I don't know how much this went into like the instruction that they gave to Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I think pretty heavily, because he kept going into these very specific poses that looked like things that I had seen beautifully painted and beautifully rendered in this art. So I love that. It was inspiration. It was reference without it being like wink, wink, nudge, nudge Easter egg stuff. This movie also has what I would go is to say, and this might be sacrilegious to some, but I don't care. I think this is my favorite like fantasy movie score, like period in film. Like, you know, there's other scores that I like of other genres very well, and there's other great fantasy film soundtracks and scores. But here we've got Basil Polidoris. He's doing like career best work. And I mean, this guy, like, he did some pretty good stuff as well. I mean, he did stuff with RoboCop, and he did stuff with Hunt for Red October. He did scoring for Starship Troopers. You know, he's done some good stuff. But this score, this soundtrack right here is probably, so I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, right? And when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you like to have good fantasy music on, and this one always gets played. So I think that it is very easy for me to say that this is the single film score that I've listened to the most in my life by a far margin. All those other things, the movie's fun. The action is over the top. It's operatic in that, like, there's no, like, it's not that there's no dialogue, there's little dialogue. And because of that, it lets the score really move the music. It lets these sort of like, it's not a movie done in vignettes, but it kind of is, you know, something will wrap up and just kind of, okay, cool, cut and go to the next scene. And it feels more epic. It feels like it spans more time as a result. Arnold Schwarzenegger is not a great actor here. I don't know that he's fully ever became like a great actor, but he is perfectly cast in this role for what they needed him to do. The fact that they made it so operatic and dialogue light worked to his strengths as well, because he was able to just look the part and do the things he was supposed to do, and let some of the other actors sort of do sort of the dialogue around him. And that's fine. That works. Now, I love this movie. This one is so cool to come back and revisit. And I feel like kind of a jackass for not revisiting it more. As much as I listened to the score, this is a movie I've only seen a handful of times. And I had a blast rewatching it, just start to finish. Yeah, I would strongly recommend watching Conan the Barbarian if you haven't yet. You can stream it. Just put it on. It's like, this is a good, like, you know, like, I don't know, like Sunday morning, like, movie, you know, the type of thing that, like, I don't know, like, if you need the type of thing where you're like, okay, I'm gonna like fold some laundry and mostly pay attention to the screen, but, you know, also if I look away for a moment, that's okay. This is great for that, and that's not an insult to the movie. It's just the type of movie that you can look up and always be entertained by. So, yeah, I'm all over this one.
Lots of glowing.
I don't have He-Man, but you know what I do have is
I've got nice
Toothless on my sword.
I love it.
My How to Train Your Dragon sword.
I love that we do these kinds of little touches for these kinds of shows. It's always
nerd shit.
So for me, let's see. This was in 82, so I was 1 year old when this movie came out. And I obviously didn't see this in theaters, but this was a film that my parents had recorded onto videotape after renting it from the local movie video store. And it was this movie, Conan the Destroyer, later on, and Red Sonja. My dad and I would watch, we'd throw it on whenever, just as something to do. And I remember just growing up, sitting next to my dad on the couch, you know, my little legs swinging, watching these sword and sorcery movies. And They really transported me back then. I had not seen Conan the Barbarian in probably 20 years was the last time I watched the movie. So it was kind of interesting coming back to it. At a lot of points, I was that little kid sitting on the couch again, swinging my legs off the couch. Just from the battling with the swords and axes and all the different weapons, to the revenge tale. The Northman was very much on my mind as we were watching Conan the Barbarian. And while I'll say that artistically, maybe The Northman is like a better made, better film, this one gets full on nostalgia points from me. And I think it even works today as long as you watch it understanding that it was made 40 years ago. And it does come with a certain, amount of cheese. But yeah, this one's super fun. Interesting to see James Earl Jones in a live action role here. We're so used to him, as the voice of Darth Vader. This movie came out between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Yes, Return of the Jedi was 83. So James Earl Jones was I don't know if he was trying not to be Vader for this, but his voice kind of slipped into it a couple times, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But we're spoiling this film because it is 40 years old. There's just several things I love. There's a scene where James Earl Jones turns into a big snake during an orgy.
Yes.
Yeah, well, exactly.
The special effects are amazing.
Yeah, and then we're talking about the poses. There's this one pose that Arnold does, and I don't have a sword, so I'm going to use a lens pen. But he lifts the sword up over his head, and then flexes, and then comes down, and then does this kind of thing, and it's incredibly, exactly, you guys have got it. But you gotta tilt the sword against your hand. That's how he did it. Put a hand up. There you go. And put the blade on your hand. Perfect, Will. Perfect, Jim. You got it. Arnold would be proud of you guys. But super great adventure. Will, I was thinking a lot about D&D as well. I don't know if I told you, but I've been playing the old 25-year-old Baldur's Gate recently. They released it for Switch.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. No, you hadn't told me that, but that's awesome.
Oh my god, I'm having so much fucking fun with that game. But I had a barbarian recently join my party. I met him at an inn, telling tales around the fire. And I was just thinking of Arnold. And so we're watching the movie and he's making sword swings, and I'm like, what was his to hit roll? I have to know. He missed. What did he get? But it's interesting. You have kind of a party setup in this film, right? So we have Arnold. He's the barbarian. Then we have the thief. Then we have sort of the other
wizard.
Thief. We have a wizard. So they've got this whole party that they're going on this adventure with, and I don't know. It just warms my D&D lover heart. So this is such a great movie.
And they reference so many things. So Conan, the books. The books tell this story of this guy who over the course of his life is a bunch of different things. He's a thief, he's a slave, he's a warrior, he's a king. And I like that this movie lets him be a little bit of all of those things. I think it would be very easy to have made, you're casting Arnold Schwarzenegger, this bodybuilder guy who hasn't done a lot of movies, in an 80s movie called Conan the Barbarian. I think it would have been really easy to make him what's the right word? Heroically dumb, right? Because that's what we see a lot of times with barbarians, I'm dumb but strong. And he's not. He is a savvy guy who comes up with some cool traps. He's a, the thief elements, he is stealthy. He kind of uses his wiles at times. And yeah, his major go-to is I have big muscles and I'm good with the sword. But he's not an idiot king. And I love that. This is a character who is, for a character with very little dialogue and who is played adequately by Arnold Schwarzenegger, this is an incredibly well fleshed out character who feels very, very real within the world he inhabits.
Yeah, Will, you touched on this, and Hammy in chat touched on it with his question. Has there ever been better casting than Schwarzenegger as Conan? And man, you talk about an iconic, like career-defining role. This was it for him. I mean, just like a perfect fit. I mean, they picked this guy up out of the world of bodybuilding, and maybe he wanted to go into acting. And I mean, I know personally of people who were huge fans of this movie and went into bodybuilding just because of this movie and his kind of charisma that he brought to the role. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this is really when you use that I word, iconic. This is definitely one of those iconic roles, and a perfect fit for the actor for sure.
Yeah. Another scene that I loved just because it was cool. I love movies that, like, okay, if you're going to play in the sword and sorcery space, do fun things. Do fun things. They can be weird. They can be weird swings. The we have a spot twice, actually. I think this happens in the movie where Thulsa Doom, his like one of his major weapons is he pulls out a snake and turns it into an arrow, which he shoots. And like we live in the age where if someone were to do that in a movie now, someone would immediately go like, "Did this guy just shoot a snake at me? What's next? Are you going to shoot a gecko?" Like there would be some sort of like quip or joke or something like that. Instead, the snake fucking kills people. Like he is murking people with this like snake that he turns into an arrow, and it feels menacing. In the moment, you don't go like, "Oh God, this is so silly." You go, "Oh God, he's getting one ready to shoot. I hope he misses. I hope he doesn't hit someone I care about."
Did he just shoot that guy with a fucking snake?
Just shoot him with a fucking snake? Yeah, like this movie, in the ways that it needs to, takes itself seriously. It takes the things that it does seriously, and that's cool.
I wonder when it Michael here in the chat says it used to be on TV late at night back in the day, and I do remember. I mean, this show would be in this movie would be on. You're right, those kind of late movies across the TV channels. But I got to think they probably shredded the hell out of this movie in terms of cutting out some of the violence and the sex scene. I mean, there's a big orgy scene, which was kind of weird. It's because I'm watching the orgy scene and trying to see what like people are doing, and I'm like, it actually looked like the after orgy scene. You know what I mean? Like nobody was really doing anything, but kind of it was like a group cuddle.
They were sort of like writhing atop each other. And you know what? I kudos to that. They were able to very clearly give like an orgy is happening here without having to show an actual orgy. And like, kudos to them for pulling that off. I mean, there were some boobies, and so of course those would have gotten cut for like the late night shot. But
plenty of boobies, but no D.
No boobies, but no D. But again, like this one didn't need D. There was no V.
I will say, in the orgy scene, there were several big, burly, muscular, hairy-chested guys that I particularly enjoyed on this watch through. I think this is the first time I had seen the movie since I discovered the bear community and figured out like what I was into. Like I think I saw this the summer before I went to college, which was like before all of that. So it was kind of nice just to have some eye candy in that orgy scene. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
So, question, because this is the 40th anniversary of this film, do you think Schwarzenegger could pull off like Conan the King in retirement?
Oh, if there were stories about Conan kind of told like all through his life. So, I mean, I would not say no to that.
Did he? I never saw Red Sonja. Did he play a king in Red Sonja, or did he ever get to play like the king part in Conan the Destroyer or Red Sonja? Is the question, I guess. I don't know if he did.
Is sort of like more of like a continuation of his adventures. I don't remember if it showed any shots of him in.
And they didn't cameo him in the new one, right, with Jason Momoa? I don't think.
Not that I remember.
Not that I remember. Of what little I remember of the Jason Momoa one, I don't remember.
Yeah.
All I remember is Baby Dick. That's all I remember in that one.
You got to explain that because that sounds awful out of context.
I'm going to say I don't know what scene we're talking about.
It's the very first scene in the movie. It's very famous. It was like the talk of. I guess we had social media at the time. To some degree.
Had social media in 2011.
Yeah. Anyway, it was the birth of Conan. His mother is killed in the attack from from Doom's crew.
They're in the middle of a raging battle.
And she's sliced open on the battlefield. No, she's dying on the battlefield, but she's pregnant and about to give birth. And the dad cuts her the rest of the way open and pulls baby Conan out, fully naked, just birthed. And lo and behold, they have to show, baby Conan penis on full display on there. And it was probably exceptionally large for a baby.
He was so. I don't remember that at all. I don't remember well-hung baby Conan.
It was a thing. Yeah.
I'm glad I don't remember that. I'm glad that so there is one of those librarian filing cabinets, card catalogs in my brain, and someone ripped that card out, used it as a bookmark, and never returned the book because I don't remember this scene at all, and I'm not going to go rewatch this movie, so I will.
So you probably never see it.
It will never.
And that's probably good. That's probably good because I can remember when we watched the movie. Because didn't we review it on the show or no?
I don't think so because
that was before.
It was before the show. Okay,
the show started in 2012.
When we went to see it, it was one of the first movies I think we probably ever saw. I think we turned to each other and said, "Did you just was that what I think it was? That was crazy."
Is it? Yeah. Is it weird for me to say I think Conan's packing?
Maybe Conan is packing.
Yeah.
So he probably grew into it though.
So here's something from Hammy, and I really appreciate you doing this research, Hammy. I didn't realize this. I haven't seen Red Sonja since I was probably 6. Schwarzenegger was in Red Sonja, but he's credited as Lord Calidor, not as Conan. So I was just doing a little bit of research, and apparently the films were made by different studios, and they didn't have the right to call him Conan. He's basically still fucking Conan, but they just couldn't call him Conan. So there you go.
And Brad, look up the poster for Red Sonja.
Let's see.
And tell me what pose Calidor is doing.
Yeah, he's totally doing the same fucking Conan. It's the same goddamn sword.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I got too short a sword to do it, but
it's not what I heard. That's not what I heard, Will.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Oh, boy. Well, definitely a film that is hard to forget, right? It's very memorable in a lot of ways. It went on to spawn, of course, Conan the Destroyer. We got Red Sonja, even if it is only tangentially linked. But I mean, we got all kinds of similar movies in the 80s that I think came about as a result of the success of Conan. Not really much from the remake of Conan with Jason Momoa. It was the thing that we saw. I really don't remember a lot about it, but we didn't get a whole new series of Conan movies or anything, unfortunately.
No. Well, we had stuff and I don't remember the timing of all of these, but we had Kroll in the 80s. We had Lady Hawk in the 80s. We had Legend in the 80s. We had the Beastmaster films.
Yeah. I mean, hell, chat. Yep.
Even the He-Man, there is a direct line that kind of feeds to He-Man and then also to the interpretation that appears in the Masters of the Universe live action film. So yeah, dude, there's chat's talking about Beastmaster. So again, I'm an animal person, right? I love animals. even when they're being set on fire, I guess. But Beastmaster was my jam as a kid. Like I loved each and every single one of those like animals and like the different like uses that they did for the hero in that. So yeah. I want to rewatch that now. Oh my god.
The big paving of the way that Conan did for me were the 2 live action series from the 90s, Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, and Xena, Warrior Princess, both of which I absolutely loved and to this day still watch. So thank you, Conan, for making those shows possible.
Here's a question for you nerds. Is there a connection between Conan and He-Man? And how far back does it go? Does it possibly go? I mean, there seems to be some, I don't know, certainly some parallels, at least in the appearance of the character, right?
Let me put on my nerd hat. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. So back in 1982-ish, the He-Man toy line was starting to be in full swing. There definitely were some influences from Conan as they were developing some of the toys. There was a limited run of Conan toys that came out. They actually used some of the Conan toys and put custom sculpted heads on them as like prop up mocks for products that they wanted to make. So Conan wasn't like a direct tie-in to He-Man or anything, but I mean, there is a link in that the toys kind of impacted the Masters of the Universe toy line a little bit. So.
Who came first in comics?
So that goes a different direction too, because the Conan books are from like the 30s. Like, you know, these are like the Conan as a character is like, and then Marvel had a long stretch of comics that ran. I mean, before the He-Man comics came in, but the He-Man they started developing the toy line in the 70s before this movie even came out. Like, so this movie did not inspire He-Man as much as I think this movie and the He-Man series both came from the same DNA of the original Conan source material, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Yep.
Barbarians were all barbarians were all the rage around this time too. There was also the I mean, I don't remember the exact year, but like the Herculoids cartoon came out. There were a lot of like muscly, fur-bound guys with swords in kids. I mean, Conan this movie,
and they probably all have like a source back to Hercules, right? From mythology and
sure, yeah,
and stuff like that, right? The strongman, barbarian.
Yeah, a lot of these things share a common DNA. But what's so cool is to see the very different directions that they go into, right? You know, like one of the things that is so very different about Conan versus He-Man is Conan is sword and sorcery. He-Man is sword and sorcery, but if you mix in some sci-fi too, and that's fucking rad, you know, like these are all like remixes of some of the same flavors, but each one comes out with like a different look, and that's cool.
Very cool.
Yes, indeed. I have something to show you guys. Let me see if I can find it real quick because it got lost on my desktop. Oh, poop. Where's that? Ah, there we go. All right. So, Jim, to your question, I'm going to show you something fun. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah. I have to look past the cat here, but yeah.
So, you asked about Conan and He-Man. Can you guys see that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
Nice.
So, these are newer toys. These are not the old toys. But someone out there made a connection for us. So
that's that look of Conan is much closer to. So he's, you know, one of those things where it doesn't really matter that they adapted incorrectly or whatever. But like the characters, like historically has like black hair, and of course that wouldn't have made sense for Conan, right? But like I love that action figure there, like didn't just do like Arnold, you know, it like took the, you know, the comic adaptation of that. So yeah,
exactly. And to Michael's comment in the chat, he says, I was going to say, I don't remember them being that posable. That's absolutely right. In fact, I have a picture of one of the original Conan toys that I was talking about. And I'll pull this one up. So this was a Hasbro action figure from 1982.
Hasbro.
Let me see. Where did it
Lord
go?
Hasbro.
Yeah, I know, right? Let me save this one. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to screen share a picture of this Conan toy, and you can tell me what you guys think of it. Oops, wrong button. There we go. Check out this amazing toy, you guys.
Oh my God. He skipped a few leg days.
Yeah. Yeah, it really has. And you know what though? Oh, and I think about some of the other toys from that era. He actually has more points of articulation, at least in the arm, because it looks like he moves at the elbow as well as just up and down. So it looks like you can do all of this. Yeah, I remember those old He-Man toys, which I collected and loved, but they were, their arms were sort of like in that
locked in.
Locked in. They could do they could chop like the best of them, but that was kind of it.
Yeah. It's interesting. Some toys back in the 70s and 80s did have posable arms, but the more points of articulation you had, obviously the more expensive toys would be. And
the more points they broke. Like I collected G.I. Joes, and G.I. Joes had a bunch of points of articulation. But like when you tried to put something in their hands and the thumb broke or the little rubber band snapped inside, you had to either get really creative or have just like a really shitty broken Joe in your box.
Yeah, exactly. Well, fellas, any other final thoughts on Conan before we wrap up our 40th anniversary celebration?
No, this was fun, and just like it was fun to go back and watch a classic movie like this, it's also fun. Hopefully we can do more of these classics, squeeze more in. I know we got it's summer movie time, so we're gonna have some newer movies to talk about. But I really enjoy these retrospectives. I think they're fun.
Yeah, and I mean, selfishly, I enjoy not just like the experience of watching a good movie that I enjoy, but it matches so many of the different like things that check the boxes for me, like the fantasy nerd, like that time of the 80s. And look, I bought this wig to do like what I consider to be a pretty badass cosplay of Wanda or Agatha from WandaVision. But I've not had a chance to wear this wig a single time since. So as I was getting ready for this episode, I was like, I guess I'll get my little axe out. I'm like, oh no, I need long brown locks like Conan. So yeah, I mean, anything that we can do that I can cosplay for on camera, I'm here for.
Yeah. One other thing I quickly want to mention, special effects. This movie is loaded with practical special effects. And yeah, they don't, I mean, CGI now, I mean, that's what they do. That's what we do everything with. But Will, you mentioned the snakes, right? I mean, they're taking these things, carving them out of a piece of wood and painting them like a snake and shooting them like an arrow. I just think there's something really cool about, these practical special effects, even old ones that look kind of chintzy. It's just, they're fun to watch. I mean, heads decapitated and thrown downstairs and shit. Like that's good stuff to me.
Yeah. I agree with you, Jim, about doing these, classic movie discussions. I know our tagline is that we review films either current or classic, but it seems very, very rare that we do classic movies because there's always something new coming out, right? But Hammy in the chat says, fuck yes, more retrospectives. Maybe we can work some more of those in, even if we have to do it as a double feature or something sometime.
Yeah.
We can dip into the archives a little.
Hey, look, our show, our rules. We want to watch it. We want to talk about it. Let's do it. If we're feeling like a retrospective kick, let's do it.
Yep, for sure. All right. Awesome. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our Conan the Barbarian discussion. Happy 40 years to that film. Arnold, you're still out there. thank you for everything you gave us in Conan. As we transition out and wrap up the show, if folks want to talk movies with us between now and our next recording, let's chat a little bit about how they can do that. Jim, where can people find you online?
People can find me on Twitter at my handle at JJP Out West. That's where I do a lot of the talking about movies. And please, message me, tweet at me, whatever. And please divert me away from politics. Somebody needs to do it. More movies, less politics, please. On Twitter at JJP Out West. You can also find me on my Facebook page, Jim Pugliafico.
All right, excellent. Will, where can people discourse with you?
Yes, if you want to reach me, all you have to do is capture a pigeon, whisper a secret into its ear, and release it right as dawn, and it will surely find me. But also you can find me on like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and just look for William Lindis or at Whatever Cove on any of the different social media platforms. Also, I'm on TikTok at the Movie Bear there, but also do that cool like mystical magical shit too, because I'm here for it.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. And you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. I'm the one that probably has Bear, Chubb, or Chaser friends in common with you. You can also find me on Twitter at iBradPro. It's been a super fun show. Thanks so much for joining us. Those of you who tuned in live, for those of you who are going to be listening in a few days, maybe even a few years, on the audio version of this show, we love you just as much. And the boys are doing sword poses. I'm trying so hard to ignore them as I give us our outro. But thanks so much for supporting the show. We will see you all next time. Take care. Bye.
Good night.
Follow the steel.